saw, I recognised, and I was like, yeah, there might be some. I have no idea. I just get told to put them on. Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah. So I think we just visited York or speaking to one of our students too. Yeah, I don't understand what's going on. I just agree and facilitate the conversation. So it's nice to meet you.
Welcome to the Preventable podcast, where quite simply, we're on a mission to help you live longer by preventing health complications before they start. Every year, there are millions of cases of brain hemorrhage, but there really doesn't have to be. And at the Natalie Kate Moss Trust, we're committed to ensuring that those that don't have to happen don't. In this podcast, you will learn more about brain hemorrhages, their causes, how to prevent them, and so much more. Expect honest, straightforward conversations that will give you the information you need to take back control of your own health and potentially prevent the preventable.
Okay, so we're just waiting for the music to be switched off. I'd like to say good evening and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Coral and I'm going to try to be your host this evening as we present to you the Preventable podcast, which I've said today, the stress of having to get all of those P's out. So I don't know about you, one of the things that we're going to be talking about during this is about stress and stress in our lives. So I don't know about anybody else, but when you got up this morning, was there anything that was stressful about? I woke up, I put the news on, I'm like, really? Then I leave the house, I go to get the train, and the train's cancelled, and I'm like, really? Not again? Then the next train is cancelled, so I'm late for meetings. So I start my day off quite stressful. And then I have my meetings, and then I come here, and Fiona's asked me, I booked on to be a guest, and Fiona said, wouldn't mind hosting it with you? And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. It can't be that hard, surely. So public speaking is also very stressful. Anybody experienced public speaking and stress? Okay, so I'm going to try to be the hostess with the mostess as we introduce the panel. But just to remind us all why we are here today. So it's obviously about the podcast. It's Stress Awareness Day. We're going to be talking to Tally later and discussing stress and also about mental well-being as well, and things that we can do to avoid high blood pressure, which can be one of the things that can contribute to brain hemorrhages. So obviously it's really important that we're checking our blood pressure and avoiding major causes of stress. So at least we've got 4 more years before we have to see what happens on that. So obviously as well, we're going to be hearing from Fiona, the director of the Natalie Kate Moss Trust, and obviously the host of the Preventable podcast. I had the pleasure of meeting Fiona when she came through the Enterprise Vision Awards, which I'm the founder of, and she doesn't know this actually, but she did cause me a lot of stress prior to the awards, because she was really last minute booking her ticket. And by this time I know she's a winner, and as a charity we give them a free ticket, and I'm like, what's holding her up? You know, she's got a ticket, come to the awards, get it booked, and I'm going, oh my God, she's just not coming. You know, it's going to be really flat, but she did come, thankfully. Her and a lovely mum, and they had an amazing night. So yes, that's how I have met Fiona. So I'm going to pass over to Fiona. Are you going to say a few words at this point, and then we'll introduce the rest of the panel?
Yeah, I probably don't need the microphone, do I? But yeah, so thank you all very much for coming this evening. Obviously, we have a huge prevention campaign as part of the work that we do in our mission, ultimately as a charity, to lessen the impact that brain hemorrhages have on people's lives. And we'll talk more about that this evening. But obviously, what we wanted to do today was to just celebrate the podcast launch, but also to share with you more about what the podcast is about, why we're doing it, our prevention campaign, so that you hopefully can go home and share that with other people. And our mission, and we talk about the podcast as not being just a podcast, we talk about it being a mission. Our mission as a charity with our prevention campaign is to get this message in front of more people around blood pressure and the impact that high blood pressure can have on potential brain hemorrhages. Because the more people that know this message, the more people who will better manage their blood pressure and therefore potentially preventable brain hemorrhages from happening as well. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining. Thank you very much, Coral, for hosting. As she says, it's quite stressful at times. Particularly the P's are quite difficult, I understand. And also to Tally and Anna as well for joining us.
Okay. So the first panellist I'd like to introduce is Anna Hyam. And Anna is the most important person in the room. Anna, you are totally. So I understand why, because Anna joins us from the Hugh James Solicitors and have kindly sponsored the event today, and it's so important for charities like this to be able to work with sponsors that come on board, so thank you for that, and welcome as a panellist. So Anna also has specialised in high value and complex clinical negligence litigation, acting solely for claimants since qualifying as a solicitor in 2009. So Anna's going to be joining and sharing her experience with us tonight as well. So she'll be sharing more about why she and Hugh James as a company see this preventative work as so important, and why they thought it's so critical. Bear in mind, it's how you make money. You actually want to stop people coming to you, which is really good. So thank you very much for being here, Anna. Then we have Tally. So I had the pleasure of connecting with Tally earlier. And Tally Ryan is joining us. She's a personal trainer, fitness instructor, content creator and author who embarked on a personal and professional evolution when she started her social media channels. Tally has become one of the key figures in the global intuitive fitness movement. I can't wait to hear more. Her debut book, Train Happy, was a huge success and led to her second publication in 2021, which was the Train Happy Journal. Tally has struggled with managing stress, but working with her body through intuitive movement has taught her to use exercise as an important self-care tool for her mental well-being. So, firstly we're going to come to Fiona. So Fiona, this is not just a podcast, this is a mission. So can you tell us more about why you decided to set up the podcast and why it's so important in context of your wider mission and the Natalie Caithness Trust?
Yeah, so I think, as I kind of briefly touched on before, obviously as a charity we were set up after Natalie unfortunately had a brain hemorrhage back in 2011. And for the last 12 years since we established the charity in 2012, we've essentially been focusing largely on the treatment side of things. So after somebody has a brain hemorrhage, unfortunately the survival rates are really bleak. Only 3 out of 5 people will survive at 1 month after having a brain hemorrhage, and whether they get to 6 months or a year or 2 years, and even if they do survive, they're likely to be severely disabled. So we've been working very closely with Manchester University to try and think about what can we do to better the treatment, because the treatment hasn't really changed in the last 40 years. So there's been amazing advancements in that space. There has been treatments that have been rolled out into the NHS as a result of the work that they've been doing at the university, and Katie here at the back is one of the research fellows that we've been supporting. Her work has also been evolving a lot, and it's really great to see how the research team, when we first went to the university back in 2012, which was, there was only 1 PhD student working on that research. There's now 25 plus researchers in that team, and there's multiple different projects. And so as you can imagine, there's more success because there's more people, there's more brains, there's more work being done, and that's what we want to continue to support. But there's the other side, and with brain hemorrhages, unfortunately, any bleed on the brain if it happens, there's going to be a significant impact on that person's life. And if you, unfortunately, there's a high mortality rate, but also there's a high likelihood of somebody having severe disability. So, just like anything, prevention is better than cure. So at the beginning of last year, we spent a lot of time thinking about what can we do to potentially prevent this from happening, but it's also something that is very accessible to a lot of people, because brain hemorrhages are very, very common, and they can happen to anyone at any time, and they kind of happen out of the blue, and that's what makes them so devastating, is that it's almost a schism in time. There was a before and an after. There's no diagnosis period, it just happens. And so in that instance, when there's no diagnosis period, there's no opportunity for someone to think, okay, well, I need to make a change here, and I can just turn my life around and I'll improve my health. You don't have that opportunity. So we were thinking about what can we do in terms of ensuring that we can prevent more brain hemorrhages from happening, when for a lot of people, they're going to not really necessarily care about it, because it's not going to affect them, because it's not affecting them at that current moment. But high blood pressure is the leading cause of lifestyle-related brain hemorrhages. And on average, a third of the population has high blood pressure, and half of those people are undiagnosed. And the reason being is because there's no signs or symptoms. But yet, high blood pressure is one of the most modifiable causes, modifiable things that we can manage in order to prevent brain hemorrhages. There's a number of other conditions, a number of other things that we can look at, but high blood pressure is one of the most accessible, but also low-hanging fruit as well. So we were looking at this and thinking, okay, well, what can we do as a charity to really push that message forward? And that's where this prevention campaign has really begun. And what we're doing as a charity is really hammering home the point that if more of us can be checking our blood pressure, because I'm sure if you guys all think to yourselves, I won't ask you to put your hand up or whatever, but think, when was the last time you checked your blood pressure, or do you know what your current blood pressure is? I'm sure that most of you don't check your blood pressure, or don't even know what your blood pressure is. And so what we're trying to do is make more people aware of the importance of checking their blood pressure, because you can have high blood pressure if you are young, fit, well. You don't have to be old, ill, unwell, unfit, overweight, all of these sort of things, smoking, etc., which is the common narrative around having high blood pressure. So we're trying to push home this message of the importance of more regularity around checking blood pressure, and having more people better understand, what is blood pressure? What impact does it have on our bodies? How do we manage it through our lifestyles? And so we're doing that in a number of different ways, which I'm sure we'll talk about at a certain point, but this is where this podcast is coming in, and it's kind of feeding into that prevention campaign and really, reiterating that message and drawing the dots, essentially. So in the podcast, we're going to talk about, or we do talk about, certain topics. So we'll talk about, real life stories, we'll talk about the research at the university, we'll talk about blood pressure, we'll also talk about things like stress, we'll talk about that today, and the impact that that's having on our body and our blood pressure, and therefore the link between having high blood pressure and having a brain hemorrhage as well. So I think it's really important for us as a charity to start helping people better understand, better draw the dots between their day-to-day life, the stress, the lack of sleep, the alcohol that they consume or whatever, and the effect that that has on your body in terms of our blood pressure, and the potential that if we do have high blood pressure, the effect that that can potentially cause, or the effect that that can have on creating a brain hemorrhage as well. So blood pressure is, one of the it's one of the most dangerous, in many ways, things that can happen or condition, because it is a silent killer. Because, as I said before, it doesn't have any signs or symptoms, and so being aware of it is so incredibly important. Because it's not just that if you have high blood pressure it's going to cause a bleed, but it can cause damage to the vessels in the brain. And it's that damage in the vessels in the brain which weaken them, and therefore they're more susceptible to a bleed. And that's what we're trying to stop by making more people take back control of their blood pressure, and therefore mitigating this risk. So that's why we call it Prevent the Preventable, because potentially if we can just manage our blood pressure, there's a potential that we can prevent potentially preventable brain hemorrhages from happening. Obviously blood pressure is not the only cause of brain hemorrhages. You can have an aneurysm in your brain, which is what Natalie had, which is a bulge in the blood vessel. You can have tangles of blood vessels, you have different damage to the blood vessels as a result of other things. But if there is pressure going into those damaged blood vessels, there's more of a chance of them bleeding. So that's why we're doing this podcast. It's to share education, it's to share awareness, it's to, as I say, draw the dots. And the more people that we can get to listen to the podcast, the more people we can get to check their blood pressure, the more that hopefully we can reduce the number of brain hemorrhages every year, because there's 4.6 million cases of brain hemorrhages every year. It's more than breast cancer and lung cancer combined. And I think we're not talking about it enough. So that's our role, that's our mission as a charity, to talk about them more.
I'm shocked that it's more than the other two combined. That's just quite shocking to hear that. And my mum has high blood pressure. That's my dad's fault. I'm going to have to speak to her when I get back, because I don't think she's aware about this part. Obviously, you've shared a couple of things there. Some of the topics that you will be discussing, are there any further topics that you could tell us about?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. We have episodes around, well, firstly, the episode that you guys will be able to hear today after you leave. When you go home, you can listen to it in the car, is around our story, why we started, the journey of the trust. We talked to Adam Greenstein, who's one of our trustees. He's an expert in hypertension, and he just unpacks it all. What is blood pressure? Why is it so important? What is it causing? Because blood pressure doesn't just affect brain hemorrhages, but it can also cause a multitude of other problems in our body. Ischemic strokes. It can also have an effect on other organs. It can have what they're recognising now is it can be a cause of dementia as well. So it's really important for a number of different reasons, not just brain hemorrhages, to be checking on blood pressure as well. So we talked to him, he really unpacks that. He's very good at explaining quite complicated topics and turning very scientific language into language that we can all understand. We talk as well to, as I said before, real life stories. We also touch on topics such as stress. So understanding what's actually happening in our bodies when we are particularly stressed, what's happening with the hormones, how's that affecting us, how's that affecting our blood pressure. We talk about sleep and why is sleep actually so important. We touch on alcohol as well. We also think about change as well. So we've got an episode on change management, because I think we can all probably relate to this, that we go to these talks, we read books, we listen to podcasts, and we know the information, but why we're not actually making the change that is we probably know is good for us. And so we touch on that as well.
We were talking about sleep earlier, weren't we? I don't know about you, but I do not sleep now. And I got one of those those watches that you put on it monitors your sleep. Well, I used to get up every morning, I would check that, and it would say, it would be like this, the blue shades, and it would tell me basically I've had like 2 hours and 10 minutes of sleep. I got more stressed. Checking that every day, I like that. I'm not putting it on anymore. It's like it's gone in the drawer, but I will definitely be listening to that one. So obviously we've talked about that. So the podcast is part of a bigger prevention campaign. So what other things do you have going on to support this mission? Yeah,
I think for us there's, it's great us sitting here and talking about it. It's great having a podcast and putting messages out there, but it's not enough. We need to be getting in front of more people at different points, at different stages of their lives as well. So certain things that we're doing currently are we have Awareness Day, so whether that's going out to the streets of Manchester and literally having a stand and passers-by checking their blood pressure, or going to exhibitions or events or whatever. We do lunch and learn, so we go into companies and we do a 30-minute sort of wellbeing session in the middle of the day, so that people can better understand the impact of blood pressure, how do they manage it, how do they check it, etc. But we're also looking at, as I said before, it's great having these conversations, but we need more systemic changes in society, I believe. And we're looking currently at bringing in the topic of blood pressure into PSHE lessons in schools, and building out a programme that we can roll out to different groups of schools, and looking at how we can sort of educate children at a younger level, just so they start having an awareness of blood pressure and start having a bit of an understanding from a younger age, so that as they grow up and they have more access to monitors, they think, oh yeah, I need to check my blood pressure as well, and it's more top of mind. We've had a real shift over recent years around especially like breast cancer awareness and the importance of women checking their breasts, and I think it's another step. I think so many of us are, and probably even more so younger generations, are very conscious of their well-being, and so we're kind of adding on to that, how important blood pressure is as another addition to your well-being as well. And so we're also looking at other places where potentially we believe that it's important to have people checking their blood pressure too. So one thing we would like to do that's not necessarily started yet, but also is at gyms. So obviously it's an extremely stressful environment for your body. And so when you sign up to a gym currently, you sign what's called a PARQ form, and that basically says, have you had an operation recently with a baby or whatever, but do you have high blood pressure? And if you don't know that you have high blood pressure, as I said before, 50% of people who have high blood pressure don't know, you're going to tick no. So just at that touch point, having an access to a monitor to just check their blood pressure, we feel would be really important to then at least signpost them and direct them to a doctor or a GP and just say, this is something that potentially you should manage. So that's another thing that we're considering. But obviously there's limitations in terms of capacity. We're a small team, and we're equally continuing to support Manchester Research with their funding. So we support £100,000 a year currently, and we're looking to grow that. How can we support bigger projects, more projects? We had a great conversation with Manchester University about potential projects that they've got going forward. And yeah, there's lots of different avenues that we're looking at in terms of how we can ultimately support this bigger mission, which is, changing the landscape of brain hemorrhages and ultimately stopping more devastation happening from brain hemorrhages. So whether that's prevention or treatment, both are just as important. But it's, again, as I said, it's around capacity at this point. We're not sure of ideas.
I really like the lunch and learn idea. So many companies now have health and wellbeing at the forefront of their staff. For their staff, they'll bring in somebody to do massages and what have you. But I think that having a lunch and learn would be invaluable.
Fiona's been to Hugh James to do one, and it's brilliant. It's very well received.
Yeah, no, I think there's a few people I will be pointing your way, to be honest. Okay, so thank you so much for that, Fiona. So Anna, I'm going to come to you now.
Okay.
And obviously, you've sponsored the event today. Can you tell me why it was so important for Hugh James Solicitors to be involved?
So Hugh James is a full service law firm, but I am a clinical negligence solicitor in the clinical negligence department. So we get called by people who've been through everything and they're at the very worst outcome. So either family member has had a brain hemorrhage and now has a devastating brain injury, or their loved one's died. So then it's our job to investigate whether there's an additional insult of that being avoidable, whether it's been caused by medical negligence. And as you say, it's our business to do that, but what we find, almost 100% of injured claimants who get in touch with us say it's not about claiming compensation, it's about finding out what happened and trying to make sure lessons are learned so that what's happened to me and my family doesn't happen to anybody else. And every claimant solicitor who does this type of work will say the same thing. People just want to help other people avoid being in the life-changing situation that they're now in. So part of our job, as we represent people who have unfortunately had negligent treatment, it's also our role to advocate for patient safety and prevention, and no one who does this area of work would ever wish this type of injury on somebody. So we will support any charity that is trying to raise awareness to prevent people finding themselves in this position in the first place.
And in the cases that you get through, you must have seen somewhere the effects of high blood pressure has been a contributing factor. Are there any of those that you can tell us about?
There are, I've sort of got two in mind which fit in with the sort of two branches of the Natalie Kate Moss Trust. So from the Preventable side, yes, I currently represent a lady who had high blood pressure but didn't know it, and there was a negligently missed opportunity for her to be monitored and treated, and she then, like I say, out of the blue after she'd taken her children to their swimming lesson, had a catastrophic brain bleed. She survived, but she's early 40s with very young children, and she can't walk and she can't talk, and she will need 24-hour care for the rest of her life. So that's a key example of where monitoring blood pressure would have arrested this months before it became a problem. It developed into malignant hypertension, and that contributed to this entirely unpredictable and unexpected bleed. So I now am helping her in terms of assessing her care and rehabilitation needs, and all we can get people through the litigation process is a sum of money at the end. They are compensated, and the legal position is that the money is designed to put you back in the position you would have been in but for the negligence. As far as money is able to do that, well, this lady can't walk and talk, and no amount of money is going to give her that back, and it's not going to enable her to raise her children in the way she would want to be able to and go back to work. So there's a limit to what we can do for people, and helping through sponsoring the work that the charity does. If we could have helped this lady not be in this position, then that's absolutely what we would want to do.
Yes, it's not just impacted on her, it's also her kids have lost the mum they would have had that could have done everything they would have done growing up.
Yeah, and her husband's juggling, they're both medics, he's trying to maintain his job, but obviously she can't do hers, and NHS rehabilitation is not particularly comprehensive or consistent, so you don't get anywhere near as much input into your rehabilitation as really people need. So without the claims process, without compensation where you can pay privately for a rehabilitation package, the struggles that people face really are quite
It's just life changing, isn't it?
Totally, it ruins lives, and like you say, preventing this is it's key for us. Even despite what our business is, we will do anything to support sort of awareness campaigns and prevention.
And so with that case you were discussing, had she had a blood pressure test, there could have been a different outcome.
Yes, that's what our experts are saying.
Yeah.
So you run a clinical negligence case, I don't know if people know this, with the assistance of medical experts, so doctors that currently work in the NHS, who also then do medico-legal work. They give their expert opinion, so only a doctor could have advised me whether medicating this lady's hypertension would have avoided the bleed, and that's what they are saying.
You said there was another case that you'd had?
Yes, because with the first limb of the charity being to fund research, claims are actually very difficult to win, and I'll try and say this as briefly and interestingly as possible, given that it's a legal point. To win a claim, negligent treatment on its own isn't enough. The negligent treatment has to cause an injury that wouldn't otherwise have been suffered. So what we often find with the hemorrhagic stroke cases is there may well have been substandard care, but what we can't prove is that correct care would have prevented the bleed. So there's one case where a lady had what colloquially is described as the classic thunderclap headache, went to A&E, they gave her pain medication and discharged her, even though she did have high blood pressure. She was still in excruciating pain. Sent her home, her husband came to collect her, and then she collapsed in the car park. Was taken back in, but they couldn't save her. The surgeons said there's nothing that surgery can do here, and she died a few days later. So we could prove that she should not have been discharged, but there was nothing that would have made any difference to her outcome. So the family was actually thrilled that there was no claim, because I'm saying that money can't give your life back when you're injured. Well, certainly nobody wants the sum of money in lieu of their family member. So they were relieved that this could not have been avoided. It helped them to process the loss. But with the talks I've been hearing at your breakfast panel, and just from talking to you and the research you're funding, could treatment have actually saved this lady? So that's another reason why it strikes a chord with us, the Natalie Kate Moss Trust, from what we see in our day-to-day working lives. Well, actually, the work that the Trust is doing, maybe one day it can help families in that situation by immediate treatment, because she was on the hospital site when she collapsed. Could some medication have saved her?
Anna, I think you just answered my next question. My next question was going to be, as a medical negligence lawyer, and from your experiences, how important do you see this work being that the Natalie Kate Moss Trust is doing? And I think you just pretty much answered that with obviously the research that's going into this.
And I think to Anna's point, just to jump in there, so we did have this panel discussion the other week. So we had a meeting with all our corporate partners and the research team at the Intercerebral Hemorrhage Research Team at Manchester University, speaking on a panel with myself, and also Adam Greenstein, who I spoke about before, a consultant in hypertension. And all of them agreed that two things really. Firstly, that regardless of how good the treatment can get, with regards to the research that they're doing, I'm sure Katie would agree as well, that there's no necessarily good outcome, really. And so that is why this prevention piece is so important. But equally, the collaboration between the different teams, the prevention side of things, the treatment, it's all under essentially the same mission. It's all so important to combine all of it. So yeah, Anna's right. Actually, the work that we're doing on the treatment side is equally as important, because there's going to be brain hemorrhages that we can't prevent. They've actually not been anything to do with blood pressure as well. So we really need to double down and make sure that we're improving treatments in that space. And there is one treatment that is, as I mentioned before, has been rolled out into the NHS, and it's now about refining that treatment, refining some of the drugs, testing it in different areas. And I had a chat with the university this week, and if we can get it right in this country, it's potential for it to roll out across the whole of the world. And so that is something that we're really excited about now, is how can we improve that treatment to a point where it's the best in the industry, and actually proving to reduce mortality at a considerable rate after somebody does have a brain hemorrhage as well. So.
I can also just say, Anna, as well, when you were talking, I don't know about you, but I could see how passionate you are. You were talking about those cases, and you obviously put a lot of time and effort into them, and see that's why another reason that we're here, because you actually do care. So.
I do, and we help people who have had the worst happen to them, and especially this lady. There, some cases do strike a chord more than others, but she's basically the same age as me. Her children are the same age as me. Fiona was saying, brain hemorrhage can strike anybody. It could be any of us. It can be your friends and family. So the prevention really is so important for all those reasons.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, so we're going to come over to Tally and talk about the stress again. So we talked about my stress this morning. But Tally, you must see so many people through your work, all sorts of types of stress. Tell me what type of stress it's telling you about. What's causing this stress?
Yeah, well, I'd love to pick up from what's kind of already been said, because I think this preventing the preventable thing is so fascinating. And obviously I'm working in fitness, that's my job, I'm a personal trainer, I'm an instructor, but my passion is really helping people view exercise in a really positive way that is a really important self-care tool. And one of the ways I do that is really by honing in on why do this. I think we always think of exercise as like a new year, new me. I'm just going to burn off everything I've eaten, and literally I'm going to earn and burn food. And actually, when we're having these kinds of conversations about potentially preventing life-altering scenarios or death, essentially, that these are the real reasons why it's so important to move our bodies. And yet, it is not marketed that way at all when you step into a gym. For example, like if you are going to gym and you get the opportunity to have your blood pressure measured, and that you can see that by moving your body consistently reduces your blood pressure, I personally think that should be far more motivating than a change in your dress size. And I think we get so bogged down with when it comes to exercise, with focusing on external changes, that we forget how important it is to move our bodies, to change the internal. And so I think this is so important, and you're right, stress plays a huge role in the kind of people I work with for a variety of reasons. So many people I work with are stressed that they're not exercising enough, that they feel like they don't have any time, that they feel overwhelmed with what they should be doing. And my role is to really help them move from like, I should be doing this, I should be doing more, I feel really crap about myself because I'm not doing enough, to I get to move my body because it is a really important self-care tool, and helping them to find those kind of intrinsic motivational reasons as to why they're going to do it. And I think when we're looking at our overall health and well-being, I'd love to say that exercise can cure everything. It can't. It is not a panacea. It is a tool that we have in our box. But you're right, when it seems that there's this stuff happening that feels so, it can feel so out of people's control, that this can feel like a way to support your well-being, that's going to support your physical health and your mental well-being. I mean, as much as people are coming to me saying, I'm stressed that I'm not doing enough, when we get to the point where they're moving their bodies and they're really enjoying it and having fun, because exercise can actually be fun, and it can be a fantastic stress reliever. I got to teach a spin class this morning. Like you, I woke up, saw the news, felt sick, and was like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I'm busy today and I'm not going to get caught up in that rabbit hole. And so I taught my spin class this morning, and I literally it was a cathartic release of literal sweat, and that is the way that it can help us relieve stress, and it can help us manage our mental well-being as well. But I would say one of the key things I'm seeing, and kind of my work, is talking about having not just one tool to manage your stress, not just relying on exercise as your only outlet for when things are stressful in your life, and looking at a really holistic approach towards our overall mental well-being. So, that can look different from everyone, but just like seeing your friends, seeing a therapist, journaling, being creative, whatever those outlets are for you, having a bit of a toolbox, and hopefully making exercise one of those tools.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think we probably all do various things to help us to relieve stress. Do you go to the gym? I haven't been. But for me, I'm a big walker, so I like hiking outdoors. I went up to the lakes the other week. I did like over 17 miles, hiked 3 mountains.
Carol told me she hiked Kilimanjaro this year, so I think that's
I did last October, yeah. I had walked before. I was saying to Tally earlier, she was talking about when you have spurts of exercise. I trained last year at Kilimanjaro. I never once have done a hill before. And somebody says, you don't even hike hills now. I said, it can't be that bad. It's like one foot in front of another, surely. So yeah, I did train for that. But when we talk about exercise and various things, it's more about lifestyle, isn't it? So it's about lifestyle, and what we're talking about is our mental well-being, stress, and the impact on the body. So when we're looking at various things that people do, how would you say your lifestyle directly impacts on your body?
So I think, like I said, I think lifestyle is a piece of the puzzle, and there are so many factors at play in terms of what contributes to our health. There's socioeconomic factors, there's environmental factors, and there's also the part that we can play. And so I think sometimes we can overestimate how important things like diet and exercise are, and also just because it's not everything doesn't mean we should throw the baby out with the bathwater and do nothing. We should be mindful of those things too. But like I said before, I think if you can make movement something fun and enjoyable and try and find a level of consistency, it can be a great tool. But I think the trouble is that I see so many people very stop-start, all or nothing with exercise. Like January is not too far away, and everyone will be like, right, this is the year I'm going to work on my health. I'm going to make all these massive lifestyle changes. And actually it feels really overwhelming, and by the end of the month it's actually super stressful and we can't stick to any of them. Whereas ideally you want to look at the kind of macro and think bigger, and think consistency over the long term is going to be more beneficial than having these short, sharp spurts and not being able to maintain it in any way. And so I'm always encouraging people that first things first, no matter how you're moving your body, enjoy it. So like you found walking and hiking, which I think is amazing. And if you didn't go to the gym, it's okay. Because there's so many different things you can do. I think we get so bogged down with like, it's got to be the gym, it's got to be this, these are the things I have to do for my health and well-being. And yet there's so many fun things. I was talking to someone earlier who's joined a netball team, or you know, there's like dance classes, or there's, you know, football team or whatever. Like, I think we get so bogged down with like having to literally be in the confined box of a gym that we should think outside the box a bit more, get a bit more creative and have a bit more fun with it. So you were saying that how people struggle to make change. I suppose my goal then for chatting to all of you tonight is to try and help you feel a bit more excited, a bit more inspired, to actually go and find a thing you like and enjoy, and to not put so much pressure on yourself, because I think the pressure to, right, okay, now I'm going to exercise more regularly, and I've got to do it 5 times a week, and I have to do it every day, and as soon as you miss a day, then it's all over, and then it's all gone. Just try and find one thing you can do even one day a week, and that cumulatively over time is going to have a really positive impact.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure in social media now when we see stuff, you know, images, pictures of everybody, you know, especially I have my own business, and sometimes there's certain people I see that they'll post, I'm up at 5, I'm in the gym. I'm like, really? You know, okay, good on you, well done you. I don't need to be up at 5 and down at the gym.
And you mentioned the sleep part before,
Yeah.
right? So I think, once again, we put so much emphasis on things like diet and exercise, and sleep is really important too, and we shouldn't underestimate sleep, but equally, sleep trackers can be super stressful.
Yeah.
And
That's
to
why
take
I've
them
been
out
there.
right? So it's like really counterintuitive, because you're like, okay, so I'm trying to be less stressed, so I'm going to keep an eye on things, and yet when we keep an eye too closely on things, it can be more stressful. So that's where it's about finding that balance of what works for you.
I've switched to the Jamie Dornan sleep app.
Jamie Dornan has a sleep app.
He does, yeah, there's 6 of them. If you haven't heard of
Is it
these,
for
I
like 50
recommend
Shades
it.
or something?
But obviously with the pressure of being perfect, it's, what can we do to take that pressure off? Because it can be very stressful trying to live up to other people's expectations of you.
Absolutely. I think, yes, I am a fitness professional, but first and foremost, I am a human being, and I think no one is perfect. And I think, you know, as much as it seems like, you know, we have everything sorted, I think, especially social media can make us compare ourselves so much with having it all figured out. I think, kind of bringing it back to that idea of talking about it in the context of fitness, I think this pressure of perfection to do with, like I mentioned before, like having the perfect workout routine, having the perfect body as a result, having the perfect active wear, having, you know, the perfect, a member of the perfect gym, the nicest pool or whatever. Like, let's take that pressure away, take that comparison away, and just do what you can with what you have. And I think, you know, one of the key things I try to constantly remind people is like, fitness doesn't have a look, it is a feeling. And so focus on how you feel, focus on how it makes you feel physically, mentally. At the end of the class I taught this morning, I got everyone, I was like, right, everyone just close your eyes. Just before you check your watch, before you look at any external numbers, I just want you to remember how you feel right now. Like, how does it actually feel? Because I think we get so bogged down in proving ourselves to other people through these metrics that we forget actually it's about we're doing this for ourselves and for how good it feels. I mean, you know, Strava is an app. I don't know anyone who's Strava. Yeah? How many people, like, if I didn't do my run, if I didn't put on Strava, right? So that is adding a pressure. You know, I was working with a girl who, she had 6 people follow her on Strava, but one of them was her dad. And she'd never had an explicit conversation with her dad about exercise, but he was quite a prolific exerciser, and she felt like he was almost monitoring her activity and felt like if she wasn't doing enough, like, subconsciously, there was like no communication about this directly, but subconsciously that he's going to be judging me if I'm not doing enough exercise. And I think that's where these tools of things like Strava, of Fitbits, of all of them, they're tools, but we don't need to rely on them every day. And so for everyone here who uses Strava or uses their watch, I would challenge you to try one workout, one run, whatever it is you're doing, without tracking, without telling anyone, and just doing it for yourself. Because I think, as we say, like, when we're relying on these kind of external motivating factors and proving ourselves to other people and making sure I only found out recently that you can win the fastest section on a run on Strava. Yeah, like my friends, I was with my friends now, like, I'm trying to be king of the mountain. And I was like, sorry, what? That's a thing, you can get awarded king of the mountain or something. Anyway, whole other thing. But I think that's so much about how much of it are we doing to prove to other people how great we are versus how much we're actually just doing for ourselves to benefit our minds and our bodies.
And our own enjoyment.
Totally. And, you know, I think, unfortunately, things like blood pressure aren't like super sexy and aren't necessarily making the front cover of like Men's Health or Women's Health. And yet these are the real tangible things that we should be doing these things for. So yeah, challenge to you. Try doing it without, see how it goes. You might find you just get to enjoy it a bit more because you're not doing it for anyone else except yourself. And I think that's when you have to take the pressure away.
I think it was a really good point that you made earlier about the marketing. So like I'm thinking back at my gym and there's pictures of really fit women like this running, and really fit men and the posters, but nowhere does it say this is great for your heart, this is great for your blood pressure. Nobody's putting those benefits to me when I go to the gym. They're just giving the body image.
Totally, and I think it's just totally, it really doesn't, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't give exercise kind of the gravity it deserves. Like, it kind of just dismisses this thing as like a bit of a vanity project. And I think if actually, as kind of as a country, if we understood how great it can be and we felt like we were allowed to just enjoy ourselves and didn't think of it as this like chore that you kind of have to do because you should do it, that we would engage with it differently and our health outcomes maybe could be a little bit different as a result.
Yeah. I think we spoke about this very briefly at the panel discussion the other week, which is this immediate gratification of things like, you're having a drink, or, the gratification of not doing something, maybe sometimes on social media, all these things that are actually having a negative effect on you. And versus doing the things that are actually good for you. But equally in the same vein, trying to manage your blood pressure by not doing some of the things where you get the immediate gratification, people are going to be like, because you don't see the effect of managing your blood pressure in a good way straight away. You don't feel the benefit. As I said before, you don't have symptoms from high blood pressure. And so that's where there's a bit of a problem, because you can go, oh yeah, I've got high blood pressure. But it's not causing you a problem. You don't feel achy, you don't feel in pain or anything. So it's very hard to get people to kind of rally themselves to make positive changes in their lives that are going to affect their blood pressure. And equally, as they mentioned in the panel discussion the other week, which I know I refer back to a lot, and if you wanted to watch it, it's actually on our YouTube channel. But Adam Greenson was making a point that some people will come in with hypertension and present with this problem, and they'll put them on medication, and this medication will make them feel pretty shit. And then ultimately, then they're like, well, I don't want to take the medication because I felt better before. So there's this problem that clinicians are finding as well with actually the adherence of making sure that people continue to take their medication too. So there's a few different points on this. Is like the recognition in just terms of a lifestyle factor of the benefit that someone has internally and their health internally, and also then further down the line as well when they're we're trying to support their condition at that stage when they're seeing a GP.
I think a lot of the celebrity stories you hear when they have made these changes, it's after they've had a scare. So it's trying to initiate that before the scare comes. Don't have the near miss before you realise I need to change something here.
With brain hemorrhages, is it something that is genetic, like people are more likely to be genetically predisposed to having it? Is it something where you were saying, rather than having a big scare, going like, oh, there's this history of high blood pressure in my family, maybe I should keep an eye on that?
So brain hemorrhages have a number of different causes, so as I mentioned before, and you could have something, so take an aneurysm as an example, you could have an aneurysm for your whole life and it never caused you a problem. Now, blood pressure is the thing that potentially could cause it to bleed. Something else could cause it to bleed, but as I say, you could have something go for your whole life. You can have a damage to blood vessel and never bleed, but it could bleed for whatever reason. So this is why, you know, it's the same, it's not the same, but, you know, for other people that maybe have, say, cancers in their family. Now, you look at genetics, somebody potentially could have genes that are predisposed to having certain cancers. Now, if they change their lifestyle, maybe those genes wouldn't be triggered in terms of becoming cancerous. So that's where it's really important for us to recognise, okay, there may be some genetic factors involved, but actually the blood pressure piece potentially is going to mitigate them from being realised.
I just want to go back to that point you made before as well about when we were talking about going to the gym and going for the benefits of how we look and how, you know, all the rest of it. And it just says something to us really, considering we're supposed to be really clever, like human beings, but we prioritise that aspect of how we're going to look and the weight we lose or what have you over the benefits to actually putting health as the key factor. You know, because obviously they're marketing to those things. So yeah, we should really have a change.
Yeah, don't blame yourself for approaching exercise without weight at all, because it's completely set up to do that. When I did my personal training course, we did a whole section. Basically, it was taught to us as like, right, you're going to teach people how to lose weight. That's your job. And actually, that isn't what I was learning to do. I should be learning how to get people fitter and stronger. That's what I should be learning to do, because that's actually not what fitness is about. I think people really confuse pursuing intentional weight loss with pursuing fitness, and actually there's been so much overlap in the industry that they think pursuing those things are the same thing, but they're not. You can improve your fitness, and you can, and you know, your body might not visibly change that much, but you will be fitter and stronger, and your blood pressure might be lower. Like that can happen too. And I think because fitness is always marketed as before and after photos, when you see a before and after photo, you kind of instantly presume like, oh well, the smaller body must be fitter than the bigger body. But when I see a before and after photo as a trainer, I don't look at it and go like, oh, they must have improved the speed, they can run a mile, they can now do more press-ups, they can lift heavier weights, or they can have more balance. I don't see any of those things, I just see two bodies that look different sizes, that's all I see. And actually I think it, like I said, it's just doing it a disservice to say that that's what it's all about, and actually when we can actually help people make tangible difference in their fitness, and we look at the measurable things like you know, your strength, your speed, your stamina, your coordination, all of those things. So that's why it's sometimes hard to remember that there's all this other stuff going on with fitness, because we do think of you know, a fitness journey being a before and after journey, and honestly that's because the fitness industry feels like it can make the most money doing that. But truly, I think the best before and after is really is being able to incorporate movement into your life for the long term, finding things you enjoy, feeling the physical and mental health benefits. I got to do some street interviews last week in London. I was stopping people in the street and asking them, you know, if exercise had no impact on your weight or appearance, would you still work out? And I would say about 90% of people said yes. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by that, because so many people said yes, because I do it for my mental health. And I was actually so pleased that is really starting to translate with people. But we need to keep kind of raising awareness of that and bringing it more into mainstream consciousness. And I do think we are. I do think there is much more of a conversation now around our physical and mental well-being and exercise. But like I said, it's nowhere near as sexy as like, here's my abs, you know? Like that's not as sexy and appealing.
Well, yeah, you mentioned mental health, and the last question I have that I'm going to address to all of the panellists today is about personally, how do you manage stress? So, Tally, what do you do?
Well, I go to therapy. I cry if I need to. Literally, cortisol leaving. Every time I cry, I literally think stress hormones are leaving through my eyeballs, and then it's not in my body anymore. And that's the kind of way I've learned to just sit with it, because I mean, we're British, we're terrible at actually feeling our emotions. Obviously movement is definitely a part of that. I think actually one of my favourite ways to move and my most treasured ways to move is just walking with my dog most days. I find that being in nature particularly like contemplative, and I tend to kind of switch off, have no screens. That's really important to me. Spending time with friends is massive. Spending time offline is really important. And just having hard conversations with people in my life. I think those difficult, radical conversations are really important.
Fiona?
I think, I mean, largely much the same, you know, many of those things, and I think you mentioned it earlier around a toolbox. I think having a toolbox to better manage your stress is really important. But I think it's also really important to kind of highlight that stress is often is attributed to when we have big stressful things happening. You know, whether it's grief, whether it's moving house, whether it's difficulty in your job or relationships or whatever. But I think so often we forget the micro stresses that we all have in our lives every single day, and that could be just getting annoying emails, being late for work, being stuck in traffic, you know, seeing things on the news that trigger you, or Instagram, or whatever it is, and actually being conscious of how do you manage those. So yeah, I think it's really important to have this toolbox of journaling and exercise, etc. But I think it's also important of recognizing some of those micro triggers, and whether it's about putting boundaries around it as well, to be conscious of, I don't want this to affect me, and I don't want it to affect my body physiologically, you know, raising cortisol, raising adrenaline, etc. But also like shifting perspective, and I think mindset is an incredibly important part of this as well. You know, the point of the podcast as well is to draw these dots, as we mentioned before, and draw the dots between all these different topics and how they all affect one another. And I think stress and sleep and exercise are all the same, you know, in a sense that if we're more stressed, we're going to eat worse, we're probably going to drink, we're not going to sleep well, we're you know, not going to do exercise. It all knocks onto the next thing. And I think having a level of consciousness about that and being mindful of the impact that it can have on a micro level and on a major level is also really important too. So yeah, having tools is great, but I think having the consciousness of actually recognising the stress in the first place is important.
Anna, how do you manage your stress?
With largely sedentary activities actually, which I play the piano, I read books, and then twice a year I bake and decorate some rather elaborate cakes for my children's birthdays. And they take hours, which is why I only do them one birthday each, and I don't make any other cakes the rest of the year. But anything arts, crafts, Sudoku. And my youngest just started school in September, and I've maintained my 4-day week. So now on Monday, I have reconciled that it's okay to spend those 5 hours just for me.
Good for you.
And so last Monday I went to a pottery place and I painted a money box for one of my daughters for Christmas. It took me about 4 hours. I got totally lost in the painting. So yeah, anything like that where the time just flies. You know, people do
I'm
jigsaws
working on that
and
one.
things.
So recently I took our team out and we went to Glazy Days, and it was I posted it on Instagram and everything about how we went out. We didn't have fancy food, we had chips. We all painted pots, and it was amazing the amount of interest that were in it. It was really quiet. It was like crazy. It was like huge. But look at these pots. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can deal with stress, isn't there?
But every time I meet Fiona, I really need to do some more exercise. Go into all these blood pressure talks and these exercise talks. We talked about the 4-pillar plan, didn't we? Well, 3 of them are okay, and then the exercise one. It's not my bag, and I've been listening very carefully to what you've said, and I think making room for movement in my life is how I probably need to
But you know what?
phrase it,
This
rather than going to the gym.
But this is like the kind of people I work with. It's like, okay, I don't do anything, like, what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden it's like, right, I've got to find a thing, and I have to do it for an hour. And it's like, you don't. You literally can just start with like 10 minutes, and it's like cleaning your house, or like, you know, doing stuff around the house is already like being physically active. It's just walking around the block. It's, you know, parking a bit further away and walking. It's like just starting to incorporate it into your life, and then start thinking about, okay, is there some time I want to start intentionally moving? And I think this is where people get really overwhelmed, and then it becomes too stressful, and then they're like, I don't want to do it. So start really, really, really small, and put and like just be really kind to yourself as you start to bring it into your life, because I think it's so easy to start getting into that like negative, like you should be doing more, you're not doing enough, and that's where we're back to square one again, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that Anna made about not feeling guilty about having 5 hours.
That's brilliant.
5 hours. This is your life.
5 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I
in the
mean?
week.
So I don't know about anybody else, but I often feel guilty if I haven't done something for my parents because they're elderly, and I just want to like veg out and have a couch potato day and watch a movie. But yeah, so thank you for that. Thank you for your honesty. Do we have any questions from the audience for any of the panellists? Oh, well done. Thank you.
My question's a really basic one that I possibly should know the answer to. But what is a healthy blood pressure?
It's a good
question.
But I think this is the point, right? A lot of the information is actually quite straightforward. It's just we don't have it. We haven't been educated at any point to be given this information. Blood pressure should be perfect. Blood pressure should be 120/80, but there is a range. You know, so they would typically say up to 140. That's just systolic pressure. So the two numbers basically is systolic. That's the pressure of your heart pumping your blood out, and then the diastolic is when it's at rest. So it's looking at those two different sort of pressures. In the UK, they will say over 140, but when I talk to the experts in hypertension, I think in America, if it's over 130, they consider that hypertension. But in the UK, that sort of range between 130 and 140 is okay. If you're probably at the upper end of that, they'll say keep monitoring it and keep an eye on it. But if it's over 140, they'll probably then consider looking at it with your medication, etc. So as I say, 120/80 is the ideal. I'll probably lead on to another question that I get asked every time I do a lunch and learn, which is like, what about low blood pressure? And low blood pressure isn't the same sort of problem in essence, but that's kind of anything under sort of 100. And that's slightly different because it's not causing the same amount of pressure going through your body. But if there's not that amount of pressure, it's kind of weak trickling along in our body, the blood going around, we're not getting the same amount of oxygen around our body. And that's why a lot of people that have the blood pressure will faint, and over time they can then have problems in terms of the lack of oxygen in certain muscles of the body as well, and that can cause a problem over time. So it has its own set of problems, but not the same as well. So yeah, 120/80.
Anybody else any more questions?
Again, it might seem like an obvious question, but how often, just going to your point, Fiona, about implementing it in gyms, I think that's a really interesting thing, because being part of the fitness community as well, like no one ever talks about that, or like even thinks about looking at their blood pressure as a metric. We're all pretty obsessed with metrics in the fitness industry, but no one ever looks at that, me included. So if you were thinking about kind of implementing them into gyms and getting people to check more regularly, how often should you be checking to see like whether there's a change, or can you check after exercise? I should know this probably as a PT, but
So your blood pressure will go up and down at different times throughout the day, depending on if you just had coffee. If you are super stressed, you just rushed here, I bet you said you got here and you're like, oh gosh, so your blood pressure might have spiked. Your blood pressure has to go up and down to support you to get blood around your body at different points. If your blood pressure is consistently high, that's when there's a problem. So to your point about how often you should check it at the gym, so the idea that we have around the gym is not necessarily to be always checking it in the gyms, but actually just at that point of contact when someone signs up and they're already doing that process, they're already ticking this box around, do I have high blood pressure, to get them to check it at that point. So that's what we're looking at doing. In terms of the regularity of how often people should check their blood pressure, so they say basically like, if you check your blood pressure today and it's fine, check it again in 6 months and just keep an eye on it. If it is high today, it might just be high today for whatever reason. You've all probably had a glass of Prosecco, it's probably all a bit high. So then check it tomorrow. If it's still high, okay, then check it later in the day, and then if it is high, go and see your GP and just ask them, is there anything I necessarily need to do about this? And that's why it's important just to kind of keep on top of it and keep if there's any changes. So as I said before, your blood pressure can go up and down. Quite often when I do a lunch and learn, someone's blood pressure in that room will be like really elevated. Then they'll do their test. What they say is if you do have a high blood pressure reading, wait a minute, do another one, wait a minute, do another one, and take the average and fall through. And that will give you a bit more of a clear indication. So if it is fine, check it 6 months later. If it's not, check it the next day or check it later in later in the day. The ideal time to check it is like first thing in the morning, maybe on like a Sunday morning, not first thing in the morning on a Monday morning. But when you're a bit more relaxed, not had a coffee, not just done some exercise or something like that, it's going to spike it. And that's probably the best time to check it. Checking it at home as well versus checking it in external environments. That's equally in the GP. You could have white coat syndrome and that might raise it as well. So checking it at home is also probably the best place to check it. So when we do this lunch and learn, we say there's 3 places that we kind of direct people to check it, which is the GP, but realistically you're not going to get a GP appointment just to check your blood pressure. Pharmacies now often offer a lot of free blood pressure checks, including Tesco Pharmacy, which is great because you can go and do your shop and then just go and get your blood pressure checked. And also in GPs weight rooms, they often have a blood pressure monitor there. But at home is the best place to do it because one, you can just do it whenever you want to do it. You don't have to go and do an extra trip, but you're also most calm as well. So a blood pressure monitor costs £40–50, but you can have one and your whole family can use them, and potentially it could save somebody's life, even if it's just one person out of 20. So they are worth having as well.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of people got a thermometer at home.
Actually, I've got one actually.
Any more questions? Okay, so Fiona, you've actually just said something there, I think that might be the answer to this, but if everyone could do one thing when they leave here tonight, what would that be? What would you ask them to do?
Check your blood pressure. It is simple as that, and that's why, in a way, I think this campaign is so powerful because it's so simple. We want to make it as simple as possible because then the more simple it is, the more people are going to do it. So go home. I'm just going to give you 3 things. Go home, check your blood pressure. Go home and tell other people about the importance of checking their blood pressure. If you all go home and tell one person or 2, then we can start having this ripple effect of the importance and sharing this message. And obviously listen to the podcast as well because
And add it to your shopping list at Tesco's. So talk about the podcast. How can people listen?
Yeah, so you've all got your programme, so in there you will find the link to our webpage and you can simply subscribe. You'll always hear somebody say when you listen to a podcast, please subscribe and then help the rankings. But actually subscribing really does help us get in front of more people. It kind of supports the algorithm, let's say. And as I said right at the beginning, the more people that can hear this message, the more we can potentially pick up some undiagnosed cases and support those people from, as I said, not just brain hemorrhages, but a multitude of other conditions as well. So you'll get an email after this with a link to the episode, the first episode as well. So on your way home, have a listen and share it on social media as well. That also helps.
Okay. What else can they do to support the podcast more, other than sharing?
Yeah, I think ultimately it is about sharing as well. So sharing, subscribing, and speaking to more people. And as a charity, we're always looking for more support as well. So if there's any way you want to support in any volunteering or anything like that, then please do. I talked a lot about the 2 sides of the charity, the prevention and also the treatment. And in order for us to move this treatment forward, the reality is that we need more funds to support this treatment. So, please consider supporting us if you wanted to, in lieu of Christmas cards this year, support us or anything like that. I think it really does make a huge difference. And if you know any companies as well, that are looking for a charity partner, please throw our name in the hat too. So, the more that we can get in front of more people, we've seen it this year. We've grown dramatically this year, and we have no intention of slowing down going into next year. So, so please just get behind us and support us in any way you can.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening. I know it's a Wednesday night, it's dark and cold out there, and which is wonderful. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you to our panellists. Can we have a round of applause, please?
Add it to my collection from now.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. I got
One of my best friends is in
I had a meeting yesterday with them. Very little that they put in they're just like boardroom and want to create a chart. Well, I actually had some meetings with and he was telling me about the new meeting actually last Parliament. No, I should have made that point though, you know, that you don't need to live as a nun. So Anna makes that point, nuns, it's in like hide under a rock, but it's just about making nice yeah. Oh no, that's okay. I know it. Where? Oh my God.